No problem. Go for it, okay. All right, we're on hold for about 2 minutes while she finishes up her call.
Okay.
So that might be just perfect with Lynn getting here.
Since we're on hold, can I bring up something that it's an old item that I emailed you about? I do have a recommendation for a hearing officer in the John Wright issue, the banning order. I know we had talked before about having a hearing officer to basically hear it rather than me doing it. Does this ring a bell?
It does.
Okay. Just so you're aware, this coming Friday, we'll have a hearing in court about his attorney in the criminal case withdrawing. So likely what that means is that he would be doing that hearing without any attorney. Nothing wrong with that, it's just something to keep in mind. And so my recommendation would still stand that we get a hearing officer to basically hear the argument and give a recommendation to the commission, because John had said that commissioners were biased. And so my other concern is that we may not get a commission decision either to agree or disagree with the recommendation of the hearing officer. So it might make sense to agree in advance to go with whatever the hearing officer's recommendation is. And of course, Mr. Wright may or may not agree with who we propose as a hearing officer. But I wanted to bring that up, and I had sent an email to you last week, and just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on it.
And I'd like to maybe discuss it after our call,
Okay,
rather than having Michelle
that's fine.
wait for
That's fine.
us.
I didn't know if there'd be a long conversation or if it'd be, well, let's get back to you if we have to read the email.
I read the email. Did you, Franklin?
Oh, yeah, that.
Okay, well, if you want, I can
I probably did.
put it in your box and we could talk about it Wednesday. Do you have a meeting Wednesday?
No.
Okay.
One of the complaints that we've gotten from the public is that they can't hear us either on the camera or in the audience. So if you guys would sit at the table with us with the microphone, that would be great.
Okay, everybody, I'm here.
Thanks, Michelle.
Justin.
We have Corey Wynn, Franklin and I, and Debbie is here as well, and a couple of members of the public, and Ann Rouser. I turned them on already. Yeah. Here, and ready to be educated.
These working?
Yes, they should be.
Start singing.
Oh, this is not on. The light's going off. Hello, 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 hello. This one's not working. We'll just speak up. Hello.
And Michelle, I'm just going to turn this over to Corey and you. Corey called this meeting, or suggested it, I guess. So I don't know what we need to discuss at this point, so I'll just sit back.
So as I understand the current, the reason I suggested the meeting is because there were some emails were going back and forth and nothing was moving closer toward agreements. I said, let's just quit emailing and let's all talk about this. So what I understand we're specifically addressing is that with the appointment of Wynn Meehan as a sheriff, and he's now appointed an undersheriff, that created a vacancy in the detention captain position, which is the part of the leadership team of the sheriff's office. And as with the hiring policy, he has done an internal advertisement, and that's supposed to close when? Tomorrow. So closing tomorrow, and would like to make a decision as soon as I think he can. Because it's an internal, that means that if he picks that person, then there would be another opening that would need to be advertised, whether internally or externally or both. So at least and probably a couple of higher decisions coming up for the sheriff. And he had notified the commissioners that this was going on, just to kind of let them know. And Commissioner Overt had said you need to bring that to the commissioners for approval of the hiring process. So that's when I sent an email and said, well, we just had this conversation with the person that, the assistant to Debbie Kelly in that whole hiring process. And in the course of that conversation, I had asked the question to the commissioners, well, we had just last year hired a detective and a deputy, I can't remember if, hired a deputy. And both of those positions were hired in the sheriff's office, and I don't recall either one of them coming to the commissioners for approval. And I had brought that up to the commissioners, and the commissioners said, yeah, the hiring approval process doesn't apply to employees hired by other county elected officials. And I asked specifically, so if I hire somebody in my office, I'm planning on being the one that makes the decision rather than going to county commissioners. And that was what the answer was, both for me, sheriff, and other elected officials. So,
Can I ask a question?
no, I'm not done yet. So what I'm saying is that was the communication of what the policy was 2 weeks ago when we had this conversation. So now I'm asking why the communication of the policy is the opposite of what was communicated to me.
And so I have a question, because are you talking about approval of being able to hire a position or approval of the actual person that's offered the job? Because there's a big difference.
It is not a new position. It would be filling a vacancy in a currently existing position. Is that your question?
Right, so you're not talking about if you had a secretarial position open and you interviewed and you decided to hire person A, that the commissioners have the right to approve that you're hiring A, right?
Well, I suppose it would, but I think I see that as two issues. Number one, if a new position needs to be created and funded, that's a commissioner decision. They can say yes or no on that, right? Once the position is created and funded, and then I want to hire, then the hiring decision would be mine as a separate elected official.
Right.
Right.
But what happens if, so just from an HR perspective, I don't know what they've done in the past.
Well,
okay?
that's what I'm
All I'm
asking.
talking about.
That's what I'm asking for clarity on.
Clarification on that. So when I do trainings and I train the commissioners on what to do, has nothing to do with, it's just a thought process I want to throw out there, okay? But my question is, I always say, if you have a position opening, right? Just because you have a position opening doesn't necessarily mean you need to fill that position. That everybody should look at it and say, now this is not the situation with Wynn, because obviously, those are positions that need to be filled. But there's a lot of times when you can sit back and say, do we really want to fill that position? Do we want to take those functions and divide them among other people? Or do we want to create a whole different position? I mean, what is best for the entity? What is best for the county in this scenario? Right? So that's all I was talking about in my email when I was saying, that's just a thought process. And so when I was reading the word approval, what I was thinking is that, say, Wynn is going to have this position open, that he just needs, that the prior process was, he would just go to the commissioners and say, now this position's open and I'm going to advertise for this position. And they would pretty much say, yeah, that position's already been okayed and funded, so go for it. And that was it. Now, I don't know what Commissioner Ober was meaning in the discussion of her process, or what they want that she thinks or she was talking about the commissioners needed to see or approve.
What I was referring to, Michelle, excuse me, is just what was in fact, I put it in quotes, just what's in the personnel policy handbook. So the policy we have been following, and for some departments, admittedly, the sheriff's department over the last couple of years, we got very lax because we just didn't have a good relationship. Not with you, and I'm hoping that will continue to change. But, so we got very lax on that one, but what we followed with all other elected officials and department heads, and the commission did, is a department head or elected would come before the commission in a public meeting and just say, I have a vacancy, this is the position, so-and-so left, so-and-so retired, I'd like to go ahead and start the process to fill it. We would give an okay, it took less than 2 minutes, they followed the process, and then would come back and say, this is who I'm hiring. And that was it. It's been a very clean process, it's worked very well, and that's just what I had mentioned to Win in the
And that was in your
email.
policy handbook.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
But that's not, the problem
When Corey
is,
was asking you guys, did somebody tell them that wasn't how you were doing the policy? That you guys were literally not following the handbook?
No, I think what and Franklin was the one who kind of opened that conversation. I think it's just a misunderstanding. I think what Corey was asking and what was answered were two different things. Everybody should be following the personnel policy handbook, be they a department head or elected official, but the commission has no teeth to require elected officials to follow it. So if an elected official wants to go off and do their own thing, they can do that because there's no teeth to require that they follow trainings or the handbook. And I think that's kind of what was said and misunderstood perhaps.
no, what I specifically asked was, we did 2 hires in the sheriff's office last year without following this. So, does this or does this not apply to, I asked specifically about the sheriff's office, but I also asked about my office. And what I was told was that did not apply to the sheriff's office, and that was 2 weeks ago, and now the opposite is happening. So, and it wasn't that there's no teeth in it, it's that no, it doesn't apply. So, my point is, whatever interpretation we're gonna do, let's be consistent, because it can't change that dramatically from one occasion to another when they're only 2 weeks apart.
Right, and here's the thing, I as the HR consultant would always say you should follow the handbook. So, and from what I saw Win was doing exactly that, except the timing was off because there wasn't a public hearing. Is that correct, Win? I mean, you were basically going to him and saying, for this policy, I'm asking for this, right?
Yeah, I was, basically, what I've done before is just gone in and said, I have an opening and I'm gonna open it up and see whoever puts in for it. And I did it with Captain Corthals, I did it with Brandon when he was captain. Never had any issues with it, and that's why I was a little concerned why we were having issues today.
And
Okay.
I have to say I was also confused because I thought you and I communicated what you'd already been doing. You did it with the detective as well, Seth.
Yep.
So it seemed we were already following the process,
Well, and
so I was confused.
yeah, I was because I want to see how many days I had to open it. And, you know, the problem with policy is obviously it says 5 business days. Well, we're 24/7, 365. So I played the game and did it for 5 actual business days. But I just saw in there where I had to get permission from the commissioners, and so that's why I sent the email out saying, hey, this is what I want to do. Are you okay with it? Because
So, does it have to be a public meeting to follow the policy?
I don't know, but I'm looking. Well, it shall be made to the county commission as soon as the department head becomes aware of the vacancy. Upon receipt of notification and approval to fill the position, the selection process will begin. So it was the last sentence there that I would think it should happen in a commission meeting because we can't give approval outside of a commission meeting. Perhaps in the new email response could suffice in the future if it's an existing position.
I mean, Corey, couldn't each commissioner give approval, and as long as there is a majority, then it would be okay without it being in a public hearing or a commission meeting?
Yeah, that's fine, I think that's fine. What I was focused on is the next page, the bottom paragraph on page 10. which says the appropriate department head shall make job offers in writing. The approval of this offer shall be made during a commissioners meeting and shall be recorded in the minutes, blah, blah, blah. That's what I
Oh,
interpreted the reference was to in terms of approval after a job offer has been offered, has been rendered. And that was specifically what I asked about 2 weeks ago and was told that didn't apply to elected officials. So that's, my point is this. We need to clarify this process and then follow it in all instances. We cannot do it one way 1 year and another way the next year. We can't do it one way one day and another way 2 weeks later. And we need to clarify if this is applicable to all department heads. Well, if department head means elected official, that should be in the beginning section in the definitions, and it's not. So that's the problem I have. I don't care one way or the other on this. What I have a problem with is inconsistency, because that's what leads to
oh, yeah.
lawsuits, and it tends to lead to lawsuits that we lose.
And I don't remember, the proposed policies, the policies that are pending, I don't specifically recall exactly if that process was completely adopted in there. So whichever way you guys do it, we should all fix the proposed policies to make sure. I don't care which way you guys do it either. I have no feeling one way or the other. I mean, I kind of personally think that, now, what does that say again? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. It says that the offer letter will go to the commissioners for approval.
No, it says you make the offer to the selected individual in writing, and then the commissioners approve the offer in a meeting that'll be recorded in the minutes. Just like we did the other, last week with Debbie Kelly's assistant. My point is, does that apply to the sheriff's office or does it not?
You know,
What's the answer, commissioners?
Yes, it applies to all.
The sheriff's got,
Really.
sheriff's got a
And,
lot
I
of
mean,
authority.
that seems a bit redundant to me. If it's in policy, it's in policy right now. I mean, it seems redundant to me that if the commissioners have already approved the fact that the person is gonna hire somebody, and they're not approving who the exact person is, I don't see why they just have to rubber stamp the fact that an offer was made and who the person is. But that's just my opinion on that.
So there needs to be a distinction between filling a position, but not for, that's hired by another elected official, but not approve or disapprove the individual hire. That's one group, and the other group is employees that work directly under the commissioners, whether through themselves or department heads, where they approve or disapprove the specific person hired. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, the first thing that I'm saying is, it's close. The first thing that I'm saying is that whatever the policy is, you're right, it absolutely needs to be consistent. It either applies to everybody or it applies to nobody, but there can't be a department, carved out from there. Okay, appointing the undersheriff is a totally different thing, because that's statutory.
Right.
So, what I'm saying though is if for instance you have an opening and you've gone to the commissioners and you said, I want to hire for this opening, and the commissioners say, yeah, okay, whichever way they do it, either in a meeting or via email, right? That once the hiring panel selects somebody, right, then there's no reason why the commissioners have to do anything more with that. That's my opinion. Because the commissioners, there's already a commissioner on the hiring panel. There shouldn't have to be that second step there.
It's always been that it's just been kind of we haven't necessarily approved the individual, and so maybe the new policies need to address a rewording of this, but it's just been an extra step just to make sure it's in the minutes is all, and we've never revealed who the person is, just that the position was filled.
Okay, so what do you guys want to do, commissioners?
I think we should solidify the process. I think it should continue to be that everyone follows the personnel policy handbook equally. And if we need to tweak some of the language to clarify then by all means, this is a great time to do it, we should do it, but, that's it.
So when's your next meeting?
29th.
29th.
Okay, so the position closes tomorrow. I'm guessing the undersheriff wants to offer and make the hire effective Wednesday, and that's the 24th. So,
Yeah, I put
But
it on,
it
As long as
sounds
it's-
like he can make the offer before that, and it's only after the person accepts it that they have to then go and rubber stamp it in the minutes.
so then he's gonna immediately have to open the next, that next spot for advertising. So he needs to wait for commissioner approval to do that. Is that right?
So,
Right.
no, it's in-house, everything. If you start a new position, that'd be different, right?
well, the thing is, it could be made today, right now, but yeah, Franklin, it does need to be done per the policies, that's what we're talking about. All department heads in filling positions should request to fill all vacancies shall be made to the county commission as soon as the department head becomes aware of a vacancy. Upon receipt of notification and approval to fill the position, the selection process will begin. So you could present that to us right now, and we can go ahead and,
Can't,
okay,
doesn't
you
close
start.
till tomorrow.
But he knows that there's going to be a vacancy. So therefore, why can't we give him permission to go ahead and start the process as soon as there is that vacancy? As soon as he is aware, not as soon as there is a solid empty position.
But if a new person, if another person puts in tomorrow and he selects that person, that's a different vacancy that will be open than he anticipates right now. He can't say exactly which vacancy he will be opening to hire against until after he selects the one that's currently open.
Let's see, as soon as the department head becomes aware of a vacancy, it doesn't
Right.
say the
They're
vacancy.
different positions.
But you know there's going to be a vacancy, right? So doesn't that, Michelle, maybe this is one for you. The personnel policies say that as soon as Wynn is aware that there will be a vacancy, and he is aware, since he's advertising in-house, that there should be a vacancy, can we not approve him today to go ahead and follow the process in order to fill the vacancy, whatever it ends up being?
I kind of think that Wayne could come to you and say, I'm gonna fill X, I may have a vacancy here or there, and so I want permission to fill the vacancy here or there as soon as we know what's going on. And as long as it's recorded in the minutes, I mean, you're following the personnel policy. As onerous as that is,
We're in agreement on that.
So Wynn, what do you think of that? Because here's what I think. I think that I don't see that first step as requiring I don't even think I see that as requiring a commission meeting. I think I see that as an email.
Well,
And,
yeah,
I mean, you could do it right now, but you could also, because as long as you notify the commissioners and they give you approval.
yeah, I mean, because it's gonna be I'm gonna lose a deputy, one, either a deputy or, anybody underneath the undersheriff's considered a deputy, regardless of the rank. So, there'll be a deputy position open. So, I mean, that's the thing, I don't wanna get in a big old, feather ruffling session. I just wanna be able to fill positions and get the job done. So, whichever way works best. If it's an email, if it's whatever, but by the end of the week, I will have a deputy position open, so.
So I think you should ask the commissioners for permission to fill a deputy position.
Fill a deputy position.
Yes, you may.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
I got yeah from both, so.
Gosh almighty, okay, please just adopt a new policy, you guys, so we can move on.
Well, I think we need to look at the new
Alright.
one, because I don't know that there's this much clarity in the new one either.
Yeah,
And
no,
this
you know
interview
what,
panel,
Corey, I'll look at that. I'll look at that as soon as I have tomorrow. Tomorrow morning I'll look at it and see, because some of the stuff we just moved over control of what's going on within the employee population of the county. And that's all the policies need to see. I mean, this makes it a little bit too, it makes it too confusing and too onerous, I think. So if the proposed policies have adopted this, then I'll go in and I'll give you some suggested language to make it clearer, so that you still have some oversight, but yet you don't have to go through all of this.
You also, I would recommend you look at this interview panel process, because that was a subject of much dispute a couple weeks ago. And then, all I'm saying is that I'm fine with this, let's just be consistent with what we're doing.
Okay, so while we're doing this, let me ask you, I think interview panels are really important. So, and it's more from a discrimination standpoint, so you have a couple of people doing it to get rid of unconscious bias. But the interview panel should be making a recommendation. That's what their job is. So, do you guys want interview panels, or do you not want interview panels?
That's how we do it at the sheriff's office.
Michelle, they've worked very well. There's some real frank, open discussion. Everyone I've been on, it's worked very well. I would like to keep it.
Yeah, with all commissioners involved. Like I said, with all commissioners involved.
So you always want to be on the interview panel?
At least be involved and know about when it's taking place. You bet.
Okay, so you want to be informed that there's going to be an interview and who's on the panel? You want all commissioners informed of that?
Yeah, I think the point is that, an opportunity to be on panel, so maybe they mix it up or something. We don't want the same person always on the sheriff's office interview panels, for example, or something like that. Now, I don't know if you want it. I'm recommending, so I think the language should just be drafted so that there's some flexibility. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 people or 3 people, but the commissioners are made aware, obviously. There may be times when it's not appropriate to have a commissioner on an interview panel either, so I'd say make it flexible, but also it should be mandatory that commissioners are informed of it.
Okay, I can do that.
All right, I think we're good to go. Are you good to go?
Good.
Yeah. When we hired the DES, all 3 commissioners were there, we did the interviews and that was it.
Okay. Now, was that a contract or was that a hire?
Hire.
That was a hire? Because wasn't it contracted
But
initially?
No,
No,
it was,
temporary.
Temporary.
it was, yeah, temporary.
All right. Good to go? Good to go.
Thanks, Michelle.
So Michelle, are you aware of a book called The Lincoln Lawyer?
I've heard of it.
So
I
it's
need to
this,
read it.
it's this lawyer who doesn't actually have an office. He does all his work from his car. And I think we have an HR consultant like that. Because I don't think I've ever been on the phone with you when you weren't in your car.
That's not true. I think we were on the phone a couple of Fridays ago. Now, I actually had an investigation I was doing for the county of Missoula.
Okay.
And they got to me before you guys did at 1 o'clock, so that's what happened, but, the Lincoln Lawyer, all right.
Yeah, he's got a Lincoln Town Car and he has a driver and he sits in the back seat and that's his office. So do you have you should get a chauffeur in a Lincoln Town Car.
Yeah, Corey, just call me the A's from now on.
All right. See you later. Don't wreck.
All right, bye.
Thanks,
All right,
Michelle.
bye-bye.
Bye.
I think they have a cell phone use order.
I think she has a headset.
Bluetooth.
Would you like to talk about John Wright another day, or do it now briefly? I can fill you up, or get you up to speed on what the email was,
Okay.
but then.
I might even saw it, like.
But the
Call right now.
email was, I was looking for a person, if you recall, last time we were here,
Right.
he had said, well, this isn't fair, the commissioners are against me, so I need somebody else to hear the case, essentially. And so we talked about having a hearing officer do that. And I was tasked with finding somebody. Well, it took me a while, but I have a recommendation. It's a young lawyer. He's currently the city attorney in East Helena. Prior to that, he was a criminal defense lawyer. Prior to that, he was in the Army. Pretty straight shooter guy. Doesn't know anything about the case, and I think we'd have to pay him, obviously, but he might be cheaper than another lawyer in terms of hourly rate. But the idea would be he hears the case, he does a written opinion to, option one is his opinion is binding, we all agree with that in advance. Option two is he does a written opinion and recommendation to the commissioners. There is obviously some concern that the two of you won't agree on either accepting or rejecting his recommendation. So that was a question of whether we all agree in advance to go with his recommendation. And then if you'd have to do that formally in writing, and then if it goes against Mr. Wright, he would have the chance to appeal that to district court. But of course, he'd have to pay for it. He'd have to pay for it. It'd be like a civil lawsuit. So that's that. Of course, he may not agree with the hearing officer, who the recommendation for the hearing officer anyway. So we do need to do something. I would say either we dissolve the banning order or we do a hearing. Those are really
That'd be the
options.
simplest, wouldn't it?
Simplest, that would be the best. So, but I think we need to either proceed or drop it. We can't leave it just hanging on indefinitely without doing this step. Because otherwise, I think that'll itself be subject to challenge.
Just so that you guys know, since you haven't been here, this is John Wright. He's a citizen. He has threatened some employees physically. He's threatened one with a gun. He's made threats to BLM. He's made threats to Forest Service. He's made threats against Elaine Gravely. He's made threats against me. He's filed illegal liens, $5.6 million on my personal home. Also against Doug Ellis, the clerk and recorder treasurer. Also against Carla Bossi, the previous county attorney, Judge Sherlock, and Elaine Gravely. So this is kind of a big deal for this county. He's blocked people in their offices. He's taken hours of employee time, and then he loses his temper. So this is who we're talking about. My question, Corey, is the money. First, you say it's going to be $200 to $250 an hour in your email. I forget which.
Probably 200.
And John would probably appeal it to district court anyway.
He might. He would go to Judge Reynolds. It's when you appeal it in that case, it's like a straight appeal. You don't retry everything in district court, and then it wouldn't cost us anything for that district court because I would represent the county. I would guess, let's assume it's I don't know, 3-hour hearing, okay? And this hearing officer would probably need a little bit of prep. He might need an hour or so prep, a couple hours, and then maybe, depending on how fast he writes and does research, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours of follow-up to write his opinion. So you would be talking about, $2,000, would be my guess, maybe more. Maybe 3,000.
So the employees who have already come to talk to us a number of times, would they be then in a position to be giving testimony and cross-examined by John Wright in that atmosphere?
Yeah, depends on who we call as witnesses, and I would just treat it like a case where I would sit down and review everything and figure out who I was calling and who I wasn't. And we'd run it according to the rules of evidence. So if we want to put in, say, a paper or an email or something, then I'd need to have somebody put that in saying, this is my email, or I got this from so-and-so. So we treat it like a hearing. I don't think there's, yeah, and so if we do that, then he would have the opportunity for cross-examination. And then the hearing officer would be like a judge, so he could control the courtroom or the hearing room if it got out of hand, or prevent it from getting out of hand. So, could be quite a show, could be fairly.
You know Johnny's all Constitution and all that, he's got his own ideas. These meetings he's been in here, he got disrupted a few times, but it was brought on for him, I would say. That deal with Carla Bossy, I read the officer's report, that was, I'm not going into that anymore, but that was completely bogus on that stuff.
Well, I filed charges against him though, and.
That was a.
No, we're still going, it's still going to district court, and so what he did, last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, I'm about to file something in court on that too, so it's not like he's the citizen of the year here.
Well, no, I realize that, but, what should be like, I don't even know what took place 2 weeks ago, or what was it? In here, he's been.
He gets
pretty-
loud. So, he needs to learn to go. So you need to say move on, but.
To this subject, Jake, who was an intern here, I think he was a last year law student, he's the one that wrote the memo that we followed in the letter we put together. Is there a legal requirement that it can only last for 1 year? I don't recall that in Jake's memo.
In general, due process of law, my opinion is yes. It is a requirement, it's a requirement that we look at it again. The reason I say that is because we're in the world of injunctions, where you prevent somebody from doing something. You know, there's often temporary injunctions, don't do this, or, stay away from this person, or whatever, right? To do a permanent injunction, something that lasts forever, courts do not do them until they've done a hearing on the merits and made a decision as to who's right and who's wrong on an issue. Just don't do it, and it would be unconstitutional for them to do so. Because we're in a position, or the county decision is in a position where in some way it is restraining his liberty to be here as a citizen, it's, in my view, it requires the same due process guarantees that a court would require for a permanent injunction. And that means we should have a hearing to decide whether to proceed and keep it in place or to dissolve it. If we keep it in place, then he can, that's a decision by the county commission that he can appeal to district court. And it's his right as a citizen. Or if you dissolve it, then you can dissolve it, and he still has conditions of behavior for his criminal case, but they're not as specific.
That's what I was gonna ask, if it's dissolved, can't there be some restrictions and stuff put in there?
There are currently some restrictions. They're not as specific.
Specifically, having frivolous stuff looking up. or
The
something like
nature
that.
of his charges in a criminal case are not about being disruptive in meetings. They're specifically about the filings that he did.
So legally, MCA-wise, you stated that we're restraining his liberties, but he's been allowed to come into the courthouse, take care of business, come to meetings. The only thing we've requested is that he be escorted so that he can't harass and intimidate our employees anymore. So, based on that, are we legally restraining his liberties by having him escorted?
It's still restrained on his liberty. It's a minimal one, and I think it's reasonable. I think a court would uphold it and say that you have the responsibility to, to not only care for the public's business, but the conduct of meetings, of work in the offices, protecting citizens, employees from harassment. I think it's reasonable, don't get me wrong, but it is a type of restraint on his liberty. And for that reason, it's subject to review. So,
Do you think he'd agree to that?
no, I don't care. I mean, he won't agree to it, that's fine.
So going back to cost, chances are he would appeal it, regardless, putting that aside, why can't we go ahead and just continue status quo and take it to district court if he so chooses?
Because the timeline for anybody to appeal a decision of the county commission is 30 days. So right now, he has no right to take it to district court and challenge it. Because it's well past the 30 days. However, if forever it goes to where it's nothing's done, nothing's examined, then he could say as a constitutional, his liberty is being unconstitutionally infringed, and he would have to do an original lawsuit in the district court potentially. But what I'm saying is, I think the right thing to do is to do a review, and that's why I'm urging you to do that. And if we don't want to pay the money, we could go try and find someone who will volunteer their time as a hearing officer. But if you get somebody who actually knows what they're doing, they're busy people who likely aren't interested in donating their time, because they have to be a stranger to the whole issue anyway, right? So they would think, well, why do I care enough about John Wright or the Providence County to come over here and do this for free? Or we could just leave it up to the county commissioners. You guys could decide, and then one of the things that he's going to challenge is that you were unfair because you were biased against it. But you're 50-50 split at this point, so maybe it's not unbiased. What I'm concerned is we'll come out of the hearing, done all that work, and we won't get a decision. It'll be a 1-1 on whatever the motion is. In that case, we're just kind of stuck in limbo. So I'm trying to avoid being stuck in limbo by figuring out how to force a decision one way or the other. And you don't have to just tell me right now, but I'd say maybe put it on the agenda for next hearing so that we can get a decision and proceed one way or the other. So options are probably, one option would be just to dissolve the banding order, as he calls it, the restraint. One option would be proceed to a hearing with yourselves as the adjudicator. Another option would be a hearing officer that makes a recommendation to you, or a hearing officer whose decision we all agree to abide by. And I don't know, that's probably about it. Probably the 3 ways to go forward.
Two questions I have for you, Corey. To proceed with any of these options, and I think the only one that we really could realistically consider is the hearing officer, whether we go with A or B. They decide, or we take the recommendation and decide. But what I see, and I'd like you to address, if you would, is I don't know if you've ever noticed that there's a little bit of contention between Franklin and I. Most people are unaware of this. I see this, and you've already seen it in this discussion, I see that blowing that up. And I see this becoming the focus of the commission rather than county business. I think that is detrimental to the county, and not sure that this is wise based on that. Would you address those concerns?
Well, I just thought of another option that could potentially alleviate that. So your third commissioner that you pick, that person would come in brand new to the situation, let them be the one that decides, or they're the swing vote, and then they can come back before the commissioners.
Yeah,
But then that requires you to pick a third commissioner.
okay, so let me ask you another thing. I think that fourth option is definitely one that's viable and important, but if there is a hearing officer type court, that means that a lot of the employees that, again, have come to us numerous times, written emails, written letters, filed reports, filed complaints, and then, of course, Forest Service and BLM, all these people now, instead of doing county work, are focused on, I'm going to have to be cross-examined by John Wright. There's going to be a lot less county work done, a lot more anger, a lot more stress, a lot more angst. Address that for me, too. I mean, obviously, if John wanted to take this to district court, they're gonna have to deal with that anyway, but I'm concerned about us putting them in that position when it's maybe needless.
Well, first of all, if whatever the decision is, then what you have to do is basically, the record of the hearing and the why becomes, that decision is reviewed by the court. We don't go and do a whole new hearing all from the scratch at court. Okay, so the court reviews your decision. The court doesn't, we don't do a whole new, brand new hearing. So, number one, we're probably only doing it once. Number two, yeah, I don't think John Wright's that scary. And I guess
I don't
I'm
mean
not
scary.
concerned, what's that?
I don't mean to say he's scary, I'm just meaning that this is 10+ years of built-up
Right.
frustration that a
Well,
number of people
But
have.
that's, I mean, that's, every lawsuit has a kernel, somewhere between a kernel and a mountain of that. So we just have to get through it, and part of my job is to prep witnesses and help them get through it. And, you know, so that's just kind of the price of doing business. The price of giving somebody a fair shot means that, yeah, if you wanna complain about John Wright, you need to come up here and complain about it and give them the chance to ask you questions. And of course, you know, we control it so it doesn't turn into a big bully session, that's not hard to do. But, there'll be, I see this as a one-day deal, so it's, you know, there'll be prep and then the hearing, but I don't see this as a thing that will drag on forever. I think it's dragged on too long, with this, in the status that we're in right now, and it's given him too much opportunity to come in and complain about it and saying, you know, I haven't had a chance to address it. And I think he has a point. I'd rather get it out of the way once and for all, and then if he doesn't like it, you get appeal, or if you guys decide, you know, the tiger's been tamed, then you can dismiss it.
I guess I'm having a hard time getting over needless. I see this as needless.
It's not, I think the Constitution requires it. And so if you wanna keep it on permanently, then let's get together and let's review the facts.
So the option from the hearing officer would be then to either dissolve it or it becomes permanent, is what you're saying.
Or modify it and maybe be very specific. I would ask, if we do a hearing officer, or regardless of our decision, I would ask, let's do it and be specific. You can come to the meeting, you have to do this, you have to do that, whatever it is. You come pay your taxes, and I would include a recommendation that until the criminal case is done, that these people that are victims of the criminal case, you will abide by the court's order which says leave them alone.
I agree with what you just said.
So we could have three options then: dissolve as it is, permanent, or modified. Okay.
I think if it's continued in any way, it needs to be modified just to sharpen it a little bit.
Yes, I agree with
Besides, it'll be fun.
Says the lawyer in the room. Yeah, I'll put it on the agenda for the 29th.
So, county commissioner deadline for applications is this week, Friday. And we have some schedule issues next week. I apologize for that. Some of that, I contributed to some of that. Have we decided on the new schedule?
I didn't hear back from anybody on the new schedule, but what I'm wondering is open the applications in public on the 29th, Monday. Interviews starting at 8 a.m. Wednesday morning. We set the schedule Monday, drawing from a
I thought
hat.
you were gone on the 2nd.
I leave at 4.
Okay,
So I'd be available
On the third?
on the second,
On the
Wednesday.
second? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One-on-one interviews, we draw people from a hat so that it's fair. And then a forum the 7th, Monday at 6:30. And then make a decision on the 8th, that's Tuesday, the very next day at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Does that work?
I have a trial the 8th, the 9th, maybe the 10th.
We're opening things up again with this forum. We just put Wynn and the sheriff, rightly so. Public has nothing to say. Same on this here, on this commissioner thing, it's the same thing. I don't see,
Well, I think,
for the
if-
people can be here, it'd be
Yeah.
public, all right, but we don't have to have any special forum.
you know, I think if there would have been more than one person that put in for sheriff, I think you'd go to that public forum aspect. That's what they did with Sheriff Dutton when it was him and Scott Swingley. They had a public forum aspect. They did it during the commissioner's time at the thing, but is where commissioners and the public ask questions of both people, and they took it all in and then made a decision.
Well, that's us in the
Yeah,
commissioner
but, you know,
meeting, yeah.
with, I think in my situation where no one else applied for that, that duty, then there was really no reason to then go on to that public forum aspect. So,
I agree with that. I think the public, I mean, this is a high-profile issue. It's no secret of the fact that there's a lot of people that are concerned about county commission, one side or the other. I think people, and a lot of people can't come here in the middle of the day. I think you should give them a chance to come meet the candidates, ask them questions. Sorry to interrupt.
no,
You
you're
were
fine.
done.
I'm not as long-winded as you are. You've replaced me.
Oh, really?
He replaced me. I'm close second, yeah, close second.
It's obviously not binding, you two have to decide, but obviously you want input from the public and other people.
Well, we'll be getting a lot of input from the public, I know that.
That's probably true.
So Corey, if you have trial the 8th and 9th,
And
Would-
possibly the 10th, depending on how long it goes.
okay, so, what would work for you? Because it sounds like you're the most, your schedule's the most crisp. The rest of us have a little bit more wiggle room than you.
Well, I don't need to
think.
be there for the decision. I mean, if you've
Oh,
made a
that's true.
decision by
That's
that
true.
point, I'll come to that public thing probably the night of the 7th. And I won't stay for hours because I'll be in trop rep, but I'll come to it, but
Now, part of the succession plan is that you will present us with who you think is the most qualified. Would you do that in writing or via email?
I would say number one, like I said at the beginning, you can't actually require us to do that. So and I wanted all the elected officials to know that. Having said that, I mean, I'm certainly gonna give input and I'll find a way to communicate to you clearly if I have a strong recommendation. If I say they're all great, then I'll say, yeah, they're all great, but that's, I don't know. I don't even know who else applied, but you'll hear from me, don't worry about that.
Okay, so we could do it the next morning at 10. That gives people that evening to talk to us, and that morning. Does that sound reasonable?
With the interviews the previous week, correct?
Yeah, the interviews, the 2nd, the forum, the 7th, and the decision the 8th. Franklin?
But I'm just,
Okay.
I'm like fluid. I'm just conformed to whatever you say.
Sure.
So I'm hearing you say a resounding yes. That's a great plan. Move
That's fine.
forward with it.
I don't have a problem. I don't think I have anything really too detrimental, but.
All right.
Rock on.
Franklin, is that good with you?
Make it to me, I guess.
All right, then I will book the room.
We'll see who's out there and go from there.
Any idea how many people applied at this point?
3 have applied, and there's another 4 or 5 I hear about in the wings.
Okay.
So hopefully they all will put their applications in and run for the position too.
Good. I didn't know this was actual meeting day, but I just had one thing, and I meant to tell you when I was up there last time. Just kind of, Brandon and I have been kind of reviewing kind of what's going on in our patrol division. And right now, Sergeant Buck is supervising 9 folks, and that's really outside his ability to correctly supervise that many. So I did talk to Debbie just to see what the difference is between a senior deputy and a sergeant, because there's only 1% in the pay scale. And so we've been discussing putting another sergeant on the other end of the week. So there's always a leader, first line leader there to answer those questions and make those decisions that, because right now he's only working with 2 folks and sometimes just one other person, and he can't keep up. He's doing it from home, and yeah, that's not what I need. I don't need somebody working from home on their off time. They need to have an ability to. And we figured we'd separate them out and say, okay, you're responsible for these ones, you're responsible for these ones, but if they're on your shift, you're still in charge. But then they only have to monitor what their group is doing, instead of Jamie trying to review and everything else, 9 other people's reports. So
You go by shifts, right?
yeah. So and that should reduce that should put that supervisory level back to where it should be. What's comfortable in the eyes of supervisors is 3 to 5. So 9 is well outside the scope of that, and it's really getting to be quite a task for them. So I think it's probably one of the best moves we can do, because our patrol division is really struggling right now. So detention dispatch are doing great, but the patrol division is very young in the aspect of the years of service. I mean, our most senior guy that's on the street is 8 years. Everybody else is 4 or under. So they need some nurturing, they need some hands-on, they need some supervision, and that makes Corey's life easier, which then makes my life easier, because he doesn't come over. So I just want to let you guys know, I'm looking at it, budgetarily, I don't know if it's possible right at this juncture, but that's what I'm looking at. And I know that union contract doesn't have more than 1 sergeant, it has a patrol captain, and I'm not comfortable with that quite yet either. So I'm not going to look at that avenue, but I think another line leader would be the way to go. So just to keep people on task a little better. So just want to give you guys a heads up on that. So
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
so that's all I have. So
All right,
we go back talking.
I'm done.
Oh, yeah.
all right, anything else for the good of the order? Congratulations, by the way. Yeah, good placement.
I'm just a happy camper.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very
You
much.
broke my first rule though.
Yeah?
So, the day of his appointment, I said, the only rule I have, Brandon, is my undersheriff, is that when you get to work in the morning, you start the coffee pot. And he's been undersheriff a week and hasn't done it yet.
Oh my gosh, Wynn.
Oh,